Welcome to the Imperfect Dads podcast.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Devin.
We believe dads care deeply about their family and kids,
but they don't always have a space to discuss what their life looks like.
Our podcast is a space for dads to discuss the ups and downs of fatherhood.
And how they feel like they're holding it all together.
Or how they're not.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Hey everyone. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Mental health for dads is a subject that comes up in a good majority of our episodes. When I was editing and listening through episodes, I felt like releasing this episode early in our rotation than we normally would be a good idea in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. This episode is with Mitchell Osmond of Dad Nation. Mitchell shares a story about how he, as a dad and husband, had reached a point where he felt like he was living a life he wasn't proud of. He talked to us about how he changed his habits and routines, and he's now in a place where he coaches dads on how to be more the person that they want to be. In this episode, Mitchell talks about the lows he felt when he was at rock bottom, and Justin talks about his struggles with going from one kid to two kids, and also while trying to be a full-time employee, a husband, and all of the different roles we have to play. Mitchell also mentioned that if you reach out to his company, Dad Nation, that make sure to mention that you heard about his company through us, the Imperfect Dads podcast. One of the main purposes of this podcast is so that dads know that they aren't alone. Fatherhood makes you look in the mirror, and there's a lot of times where you don't like what you see. I really hope that if that's part of your story in this moment, you know that you're not alone. There are lots of other dads just like you trying to figure out how to become the dad that they want to be. And if you feel alone, make sure that you talk to a friend. Honestly, you can always send us a message on Instagram or on anything, and that fatherhood can be very isolating, but you aren't alone. You're never alone. And with that said, we really hope you enjoy the episode.
So yeah, Mitchell, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started with Dad Nation, how you got started with coaching, and how many, just everything in general.
Whoa, that's too many questions to lead off with, Justin.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so what you like my Genesis story? Like what
kind
of
do you want, Justin? That's a big, that was
the Genesis story.
Okay?
Just pick one, Justin.
Yeah, pick. Which one do you want the most, Justin?
Whatever one, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you my story.
Yes.
I'll keep it as tight as possible because it's a big one. But man, a little bit about my background is I came from a dysfunctional home. My father was an alcoholic, drug user, and my mom is still a faith-filled saint, church 5 times a week kind of thing. And then I have my 2 sisters who grew up, and I was the youngest of, a youngest boy in the family. And one went to be a high-ranking military official. The other one spent most of her teenage life in juvenile homes and is currently in a penitentiary. So this will give you an idea of the, the dichotomy, the tension I grew up in with being split down the middle. There's a lot of alcohol, drugs, sexual trauma, like a bunch of different things that kind of I grew up in. And I thought I had it all handled. My therapist told me later on in life that I got by being the savior of my family, holding everything together until I got married. And we were about 3 years into marriage. The first 3 years were very, very difficult. And what had happened was I didn't deal with this unprocessed pain, and those unhealed wounds kind of began to bleed out into my marriage, onto my wife. And it all came to a head. One day I was sitting on the couch in my living room with my wife, and we had a fight, and it felt different. It felt like this might be over if this keeps going on. And I'll save the details, but essentially it was this defining moment of like, if things don't get better, we're done, right? I was 50 pounds overweight. We were $100,000 in consumer debt. Our marriage was on the rocks. I was recently let go of my position in in a senior leadership position. Coming home, pretty anxious, pretty depressed, checking out, self-medicating, you name it. Life was a mess, man. And so I ended up, like a week after that, I ended up going to a funeral, and I was singing at the funeral, and I was just side stage getting ready to sing the last song. And the minister at the funeral, this guy who had passed away was like a wealthy philanthropic man. There's like 1,000 people at this funeral, big deal. And the minister in the funeral had asked the people in the room, after telling his story of all the great things this man had done, he said, "Are you living a life worth imitating?" Are you living a life that would inspire others? And I thought in that moment, man, if I died today, if I walked outside of this church and got pummeled by a bus, no one would want my life. They wouldn't want my body. They wouldn't want my bank account. They wouldn't want my marriage. They wouldn't want any kind of legacy that I was leaving. And I went to sing the last song, and I could barely choke out the lyrics, man, because I was like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing? Like, I have nothing to show for this. And so, man, the next day, I got up, and on my Instagram, there's like a before and after photo. The next day I got up, that was the before photo.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm taking ownership. I'm going to go all in. I'm no longer going to be a victim. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to, like I said, take ownership, to lead my wife well, and to take my life back. And so I went through a series of transformations, man. Within a year and a half, we had paid off the $100,000 in debt. I had dropped the 50 pounds. We had restored our marriage. I was, fully present, fully confident, off any kind of substances, and back into a leadership position, fully fulfilled. And so what had happened, man, was because I was in this public position, people would always ask, like, what are you doing, bro? Like, you're showing up, you're on fire, you're losing weight. Like, there's a whole different countenance about you. And so I just kind of started sharing what I had learned and what was working for me with my friends.
Yeah.
A lot of them happened to be men like me. And someone had said, hey man, why don't you just start a podcast or like start an Instagram channel or something? Just kind of like give some back to the world, And I was like, I guess I could. So I started an Instagram channel and just being like, honestly, man, just sharing information that I learned, diet tips or finance tips or marriage tips, communication tips, all that kind of stuff. And so people started following from all over the world, and I'd be getting DMs like, hey man, needed to hear this today. I had a big fight with my wife, and this totally resonated, or you name it. And so I had a few people reach out. The more I started to do this and the platform grew, I would have people reach out and be like, hey, do you offer anything like coaching or courses, or like, could you teach me?
Yeah.
And I was like, actually, you know what? First came the podcast. They were like, you should start a podcast, man, and just kind of give us some like long form content to like actually let us into your life and exactly how you did what you did. So I started the podcast in January. That was last January, not that long ago.
Yeah.
By September, I had people messaging me and like, could you help me? Could you coach me? Because I've been hearing your concepts and theories and all that stuff. And so I was like, sure, so but I had been in senior leadership positions for over a decade. I had been in positions where I was mentoring and leading others for a long time. And so going from mentorship and leadership to coaching really was a very seamless thing. So I launched a coaching practice, and then really just kind of started teaching men how to do what I did. Really what my offer is I help high performing men or career driven men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness. And a lot of my clients are business leaders, CEOs, executives, you name it, who have seen professional success, who have built the business, whatever, but their personal life has become a bit of a mess, and they feel powerful at work, but they come home and they feel powerless, and it's like, why is it that I can lead this boardroom and I can like lead this organization, but I come home and I don't even know how to talk to my wife? And so I help men in all the things outside of business, which really at the end of the day is what really moves the needle.
Yeah.
Is your physical fitness, is your health, is your marriage, is your key relationships, is your mindset, your confidence, all those different things, right? So yeah, man. And that's what I've been doing. And so, yeah. And so the podcast, the coaching, that's my story. That's how I got here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I might be reaching out to you. I'm a partner and the executive operations manager for a landscape company in Greater Nashville, and what you were just describing is the motions that I'm going through at the moment with uh two kids, one being 6 months old, and the coming home and having zero energy and just wanting to fall asleep and stay asleep for days upon days, um, and just having no drive whatsoever.
100%.
So, yeah, I resonate with that for sure.
Tell you what, man, you're not uncommon. You are not uncommon at all. There are literally thousands and thousands of men who are in your position, and it's a lonely road. It's a lonely road because we often don't feel comfortable talking about these things to just everybody because you're a man. There's that masculine essence in you that says, "Nah, man, take care of it, lock it down. You got this,
Yep.
right?"
Yep.
But we don't talk about our feelings. We don't talk about our vulnerabilities and what our struggles are. And so even if you did have the courage to talk about it, you just be fearful that you get shut down or that everyone would think you're weak, right?
Yep.
Pretty much.
So
Yeah,
I hear you, bro.
I had a conversation with my sister over the weekend, and she started therapy, I guess, a couple months ago. I'm restarting therapy in a couple of weeks, and she was saying I had to be upfront with my therapist. We're from the Midwest where we we shut and push everything down. We don't ever express our feelings at all. You are going to have to call me on that and really pull that out of me in order for this to actually work. And the therapist was like, I can make that happen. So so that's something that I'm hoping that with my therapy sessions that ends up happening as well.
Can I give you a little something to chew on as you prepare for that?
Yeah.
Make sure that the therapist that you see you have that they resonate with you, that it feels like a great relationship, that you feel like you're understood, that you're seen, that you're heard, and that you're actively getting the help that you need. Here's the thing. There are great mechanics. There are bad mechanics. There are incredible dentists. There are bad dentists.
Yep.
There are incredible therapists and there are bad therapists, right? There are therapists that are just going to read from a binder, their curriculum, and they're just going to try and push something on you. So just make sure that, because and no joke, man, 90% of the guys that come to me have already been through therapy and said to me, man, this therapist kept trying to shove this cookie cutter thing down my throat and it wasn't what I needed. And I felt like I just had to sit in my emotions and I had to like just cry and just do all the things that they said I needed to do, but that's not what I needed to do. What I needed to do was get out of my head and in my hands. And I needed to, you know what I mean? And so what happens is a lot of times we feel like we're forced into some sort of way of processing and we don't necessarily have the tools to be able to speak to that and say, no, that doesn't work for me. Or we don't even have the confidence to say, I'm not comfortable with that, or this isn't working. Because if we did have that confidence, we wouldn't be in there in the first place, right? And so what I say is just go for it, but be clear about what you want. And if you're not getting what you want and you're not getting what you need, don't continue it. Find somebody who gets you and can call you up and actually hold you to the standard that you said you wanted for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
It's also true. It's finding the therapist that you have a solid connection with and pushes you in the ways that you need to be pushed is a journey. I know like BetterHelp is really good at like if you need to change therapists, it's like no questions asked. You just put in the request and you try again. But yeah, no, I'm with you, Mitchell. Like if the therapist you're talking to every time you leave, you're like, then it's like don't ignore that. Like or talking to your wife or someone who you can trust and like just be like, here's how I felt before I went into the session, like, and here's how I felt afterwards. Just be honest with someone else how you felt about your relationship with your therapist. Mitchell, did it surprise you at all whenever you started your platform how many men were in a very similar position as you? Because I would probably feel a little surprised to be like, I knew some people felt like this, but oh my gosh, I didn't know this many people felt like this.
Yeah, man, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I was surprised at how many people were feeling that way, and then also how many men were uncomfortable with talking about it. And there's this interesting thing, complexity or like this juxtaposition of like, hey, I want to follow you because I want to get help, and you engage in conversation like I don't want to talk about it. So I'm like, what we do here, man?
How can I help you?
Yeah.
Oh, because we're men, we don't necessarily even have the tools, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll say, hey man, let's just jump on a quick call and I'll hear more of your story. And then boom, just it all comes out, and so to answer your question, yeah, tons and tons and tons of men. But you just won't ever hear about it publicly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately.
Do you think that were there any books or anyone who you specifically gravitated towards at the start of your journey who helped you get started on this journey and to like stick to it and stay disciplined?
It's a great question. So I have a what I call my dream team, P5, which is one of my frameworks. Is that I pick the top 5 people that are successful in the areas that I want to grow in, and this comes off of this. It's a platitude at this point, but the old saying like you are the combination of the top 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, that's true. It is what it is. If you want to be more anxious, stop hanging out with anxious people. Right? If you want to be more wealthy, stop hanging out with broke people. The statistic is something ridiculous. Like, for example, I think it's like if you are hanging out, if your best friend is obese, you have a 70% greater likelihood to become obese within 3 years.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. And so one of the systems I do with my clients is we go through like an audit of your entire life. Like your social circles, your time, your energy, all that stuff. And the social audit is like who is in your circle that's giving you energy or draining you energy? Who in your circle is giving you time or draining your time? Who in your, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so what I do is, we identify the areas where you are weakest or maybe have the most insecurity or the greatest sense of challenge. And then you reach out to the people in your life. And so to answer your question, this is exactly what I did. I needed help financially. I needed help in my marriage. I needed help in my fitness, and I needed help in my overall confidence. And so I went into my circle and I was like, who do I know that's in the best shape? Number one. Who do I know that has the best marriage? Who do I know that has the most money? Honestly, at the end of the day, who do I know that's the most confidence? And I reached out and I said, hey, you're just like, you have the best marriage, it seems, or you're just in incredible shape and you've always been super consistent. Would you be willing to just meet me for coffee once a month and just to kind of share with me like how you did it or like encourage me? I just need some mentorship. I need some help. And so what that resulted in was 5 hours a month. Now, why is that important? Because if you don't change your inputs, your outputs will never change, right? It's the old definition of insanity, like keep doing the same things and expecting different results. If you want a different life, you have to start making different decisions and having different conversations. And so what these men also did was actually showed me that it was possible because they were living proof, and they showed me how to do it because they had been there. And I will say, I'll encourage you with this, or anyone who's listening, if you're thinking you want to do that, but you feel like maybe you don't want to be a burden, or they're just going to be like, oh man, I don't want to give them my time or whatever. You think about when the last time somebody asked you for advice about something, you probably felt flattered a little bit because you're like, oh, wow, well, yeah, I'd be happy to chat for like a half hour or an hour, share with you what I did, right? It's flattering, it's humbling, right? That same feeling doesn't go away no matter how high you reach up in the circle. And so here's the thing. Anyone who's been ahead of you, who's gone to where you're going, understands how hard it is to get there. So they're never going to like poo-poo on you for trying to get there. You know what I mean? It's only the naysayers. Those are the people that are going to hold you back and criticize you for trying to get somewhere different and to elevate your life. But here's the thing, they're not going to be where you're going. So it doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter what they say. Reach up because anyone ahead of you will never criticize you for what you're trying to do. So that's what I did. Top 5 people, and I reached out to them. They held me accountable and they showed me what was possible until I got there.
Yeah. And also, like, I mean, a lot of your story it seems like it comes from like you're at a very low place in your life and then you built yourself up. And to some extent, if someone asks me about like a hardship that I've gone through and then I get to walk them through what it was, it also then it gives me power over who I used to be also. Like I don't live in the former definition of myself anymore. I'm more like, oh, I was this person. Oh my gosh, I was able to overcome this. It also reminds yourself of what you were able to accomplish that a younger version of yourself did not believe you could accomplish.
100%.
So it does it encourages yourself also to be like, oh, I was able to do this. Hey, you can trust me. You can do this because I never believed I could do this. So it's really cool when you have that opportunity to do.
I got the that PDF about the roommate remedy thing. That's something else that is definitely in my life right now, where we just had a 6-month-old boy, and we are just so tired by the evening time and nighttime that all we do is sleep. And there's like no intimacy, or not as much intimacy as there needs to be, and we kind of feel like that roommate type of feeling at the moment. And I'm like, man, I need to get out of this rut and change and do something, but I always fall back to, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And I know that probably one of your things is you have to be persistent and you have to actually push through and actually do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, here, let me challenge you with this, Justin. You know, you say, well, I'm gonna do it Monday, or I'm gonna do it next week. So what happens is nothing changes, right? But we also aren't doing anything different. You probably keep doing the same thing. You go to work, you come home, you get tired, you pass out, you go to bed, you get up, you go to work, you come home, you get tired, you get pass out, you go to bed. And so it's like, well, something's got to change. Every good diet starts on Monday.
Yeah.
That's just the way we work. And until we're ready to say, I'm going to draw a line in the sand, all right, after this point is different. I'm going to have somebody call me to a higher way of living. Help me identify the man that I want to become and hold me to that standard. And it's super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But essentially, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, man. Because that's what happens. We go into parent mode, and we go into survival mode, where we become really great roommates.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And yeah, can you manage a home really well? Yeah, for sure. But is it sexy? Heck no. You know?
Yeah.
And so, but we stop pursuing each other because there's something that gets in the way. That's called a baby, right?
Yeah.
And rightfully so. But what happens is we lose our marriage in the process, right? We lose our intimacy. And so you're, you know, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but maybe your wife feels more like a mother than she does a wife. Or she might
Yeah.
feel more like a mother than she does a bride. I would say even more. When was the last time she felt like a bride? You know, it's probably been a while. And I'm not saying it's just you, Justin. I'm saying everybody. That's my
Yeah.
wife too, right?
Yeah.
That's everybody. And so what does it look like for us to go backward prior to what, you know, when the baby was born, and really kind of get intentional? And that's why it's called a roommate remedy. Is to remedy that, to learn how to have fun with your wife again, to learn how to laugh together again and do fun things like when you dated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, I'm definitely gonna to look at this posted on our Instagram as well, and hopefully start trying to do some of these activities.
Yeah, for those listening, it's just 113 activities, like different things you can do with your wife. It's really cool. Like there's just a ton of different things that you can do, and you go through it and you write on all the activities. You write from like -3 to +3, and then you give it to your wife, and she goes through the same list and rates all these different things that you can do from a -3 to a +3, and then you go through the tool after and you highlight everything that was a 2 and above, so all the 2s and 3s, and you highlight all those things, and those are your date ideas because those are things that you both really enjoy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's everything. Everything is on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like archery,
Ooh,
crafting,
okay.
I don't know, like
Skydiving.
skydive, you name it, man. It's all there because the point is to think outside the box,
Yeah.
right? So hopefully it helps, brother.
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to it. I was like, dang, that's perfect. Something that I need right there.
I also have another resource too for free on the website. It's called Igniting Intimacy, which is 50 of my favorite questions to ask your wife to engage her emotionally, and create more intimacy, because our wives need to be engaged emotionally
Mm-hmm.
before they can engage physically. And that's the challenge, is men are the opposite. We need to be engaged physically before we can be engaged emotionally. When you think about having sex right after that, you know, post sex pillow talk, kind of like you're just like that's when you're emotional, right? You're
Yeah.
like willing to talk about things that you weren't before. But women are the complete opposite. They need to be engaged emotionally before they can get physical. And so what this igniting intimacy, what this does is it just bridges the gap and gives you language and questions to ask her to engage her emotionally.
That's awesome. Kind of overall theme of like what I feel like you'll agree with this. One of my favorite Albert Einstein quotes is, "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it." And I think we go through so much of our days not realizing that we need to change our entire framework of how we view our life. Because you're like, all right, I went to work again, I'm coming home, fell asleep. Cool, you need to change things. Cool. Well, I'm just gonna repeat what I did before and see if anything's different this time. It's like, no, you have to actually literally remove your consciousness and like put a new one in its place, because the patterns, habits you've done aren't working. and you know they aren't working, but it's so hard to convince yourself that changing your habits is actually worth anything. So you have to like, that's a way that I remember hearing that quote and be like, oh no, like if I want to change my life, I have to change my consciousness. I have to change something at like this deep level within myself for me to actually carry through with the actions.
Yeah, you need to change how you think. And
Mm-hmm.
and here's the problem with thinking is 95% of the decisions we make every single day are made subconsciously.
Yep.
Only 5% of what we do we actually think about. And so what does that mean? The vast majority of our lives are lived on autopilot. That's why
Mm-hmm.
men get stuck in these cycles of reliving the same year over and over and being stuck in the same insecurities, the same fights with their wife, the same, yo-yo diets, the same everything. It's because the vast majority of our life, it happens on the subconscious level. And so what we need to do is learn to question those beliefs, change the way we think. And that's just usually not done by yourself. It's very rare to be able to do that. You have to have somebody come in, an external force that can actually question you on those ways of thinking, right? It's a powerful concept.
That is, yep. It's other way I've heard it phrased is like you feel like you're asleep to your life basically, and you're just desperately trying to wake yourself up. And that's what really wakes you up usually is like a rock bottom, sadly,
Yeah.
and then makes you
Yeah.
actually finally change your habits. And I always look at people, I'm like, by the way, let this be your rock bottom. Don't dig deeper. Don't see if there's a basement underneath there. Just stop here. Let this be your rock bottom.
Yeah, men get into that
Yeah.
specifically a lot because we may feel emotions, but we don't necessarily have the same language, or we're not as intuitive with our emotions to even understand what's going on. Women
Mhm.
are just so much more intuitive, generally speaking. And so what happens is men get to a point where they hit rock bottom. And for the guys who reach out to me, it's usually my wife left, or I found out that she's been saving money because she's got a down payment on a place. She's
Damn.
taking the kids,
Yeah.
or whatever, or like I just got a bad diagnosis from the doctor, or I'm so anxious and stressed, insecure, I lost my job. It's always some big crisis. And so that's often, unfortunately, like you said, what it takes to shake us to our core to say enough is enough, right?
Yeah.
And I encourage guys, don't wait.
Wait, you don't have to wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had that mentality of, okay, I had to change. I'm gonna be 4 years sober
Yeah, you've made some
this
definite big healthy changes in your life,
That's
Justin.
July.
amazing,
Yeah.
bro.
This July 5th, and it was one of those things where July 4th, completely plastered. My wife was gonna be giving birth in September of that year, and she was like, "I can't have you continue to do this lifestyle when we have this kid." And I literally, and like she was like, "Something has to change, or our marriage could possibly change." And it wasn't until that point that I was like, "All right, dude, I really have to step it
Mhm.
up." And I haven't had a single drop since. And it was super easy in a way. Like
Mhm.
I still want to continue to do it, but I stopped cold turkey. And I said, all right, I'm not going to have a single sip going forward. I don't want to relapse because I'm one of those guys that if I get addicted to something, I'll go crazy with it.
I think you've said before, Justin, a drink isn't an option for you. It's never
No,
singular drink. It is
no.
drinks. So
Yeah.
yes.
I had a problem with consumption. That's what it was, is just I'll have another. I'll have another. I'll have another. And then when it catches up, I'm like completely shit faced. But that decision was in my mind a lot easier than say losing this weight that I've put on and the trying to find that spark and that intimacy again.
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, Justin, it's amazing, man. Sobriety is huge. That's such a yeah. Some of my clients, one of my first clients called me drunk, actually, crying on the phone, and he was one of the guys who found out his wife had several $1,000s saved, and she had a plan to leave. But here's the thing, and this is something I talk to a lot of my clients about. It's like it's this concept of like why power versus your willpower. Okay, so having a goal that's connected with your why
Mhm.
versus just something that just requires more of your willpower is different. There's something different about. So, for example, if I said to you, if you got or you, Devin, or whatever, if we got a bad diagnosis from the doctor, and he said, you need to lose, 50 pounds. Okay, that's going to be hard to do. But if he instead said, if you don't get your health in order, you will not live to walk your daughter down the aisle.
Yeah, a little different.
That, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Or you will not be able to throw the ball with your son in the backyard within 6 months if you don't change the way you live. And that's something that connects deeply to our why as fathers, as husbands, as men. And so when your wife had that conversation with you about like, man, we may not be married, or this is not going to work for me. You're about to become a dad. That's a why power kind of conversation of like that connected with you deeply.
Yeah.
And that's so
Mhm.
much greater than willpower. Now, the thing with the weight is, there's a reason why it's harder is because you still got options. You could be 190 pounds. You could be 200 pounds. I mean, I know a guy who's 450 pounds and he's still alive, you know? So at the end of the day, you're like, well, my wife's not going to leave me, you know? So you're giving yourself an option, right?
Yeah.
But you know, another sort of analogy I use is like, we don't necessarily always get what we want, but we get what we need,
Mhm.
right? So if I said to you, Devin, tomorrow, um, if I held a gun to your head and I said, if you don't come up with $5,000 to give me, I'm going to pull this trigger in 2 days, right? You would find the money. Doesn't
Yep.
matter if you were homeless, if you were
Yeah, yeah,
broke,
yeah.
you would be
Selling some
calling.
stuff. Yep.
Exactly, because you have no other option.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
if I said to you, hey, Devin, could I have 5 grand? I mean, I know we just met, but I'd really like it. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I want the money, but I
Yep.
don't need it, right?
Yeah.
And so what is this, a need versus a want? You get what you need because you will move heaven and earth to do it, right? And so this is probably some of the reasons psychologically, Justin, why you can have having some struggles in certain areas and maybe not struggles in the other, or whatever. But not just you, but just us as men
General.
in
Yeah.
general, right? Like there's a sense of urgency. And if we can connect our goals with our why, our core values as men, husband, and fathers, then that just means something different, you know?
Yeah. Definitely.
Man.
Tell us, Mitchell, how does this, since you have been able to reorganize your life, live in a path that you want to live in, how does it make you feel different as a father? How has that affected how you parent your kids and how you feel as a father?
I don't think anyone's ever asked me that
Yeah.
question, man.
Yeah.
That's a
Because
great question.
went from low point where you're probably like, oh, I do not want my kid to be like me, to now like, there's a couple things I hope my kid emulates at some point in time.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. You know, dude, I just literally had this conversation with my wife about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I said, for the first time in my life, if I feel like if I died tomorrow, I would have no regrets. That I would be able to draw my last breath in peace. And to know that, because my son is still young, to know that even if he doesn't consciously remember me, the legacy that I'm leaving with, you know, how I love my wife and the company and the coaching, the podcast and all that stuff. I'm like, he will know what I was about. He will know that I loved him. He will know that I was a good man. And I can lay my head on the pillow at night and with confidence and peace and knowing that. And so I guess to answer your question is, how has it affected me? It's given me confidence. You know,
That's awesome.
I don't question if I'm a good model for my son anymore.
Yeah.
You know, because here's the crazy thing, man. Is statistically, we know our boys will become us,
Mm-hmm.
and our daughters will grow up to crave the attention that we give them as their fathers, and they're going to crave that same attention from their husbands one day, right? And so I ask my clients, what kind of man do you want your daughter to marry? What kind of man do you want your daughter to bring home? And the best chance of her bringing home a high quality man is you becoming that version, because that's who she's going to look for, right? And I know that to be true because I see it every day, but I also see it in my family. My sister grew up and married an alcoholic because my dad was an alcoholic, right? It's just the way it works. And so it's given me confidence in doing all this to say, yeah, like I love my boy and he's going to love me and I am the best version of myself. And I think when he grows up, if he's doing some of the things that I'm doing, I'd be proud of him. You know what I
That's
mean?
great.
I wouldn't think, hey, I wanted a different life for you. I wouldn't have that thought. And so that peace of mind that comes from that is powerful.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
That
trade it
is.
for anything.
No, man, I think that's, as a dad, like that's where you're hoping to be, is that if your kids looked at your life whenever they get to be the age you are now, they aren't like, oh, I would have made some changes. They aren't just like, how do I if my daughters marry someone who is the exact opposite of my personality, I would view that as a very damning thing about who I am as a person,
Look back at yourself and be like, what did I do?
Oh, messed up some things there. Good to know.
One other thing that I want to talk to you about is you had said that you reached out to people for being like whoever you thought was confident, whoever you thought was in good health, and asked them about how they do what they do to get into that shape, into that health. What for you did you get in, like, do or start to do to lose all that weight? Because I saw that picture that you have on your Instagram and your website, and it's a transformational pictures, man.
Hmm.
Like, you can tell like you have more life in that picture than that after picture, just in your face and your eyes and your smile.
You know what's funny, man, is people don't talk about the six pack and they don't talk about the body transformation. They talk about my face.
Hmm.
And they're like, there is a life in your eyes that did not exist in the before photo.
Yeah.
And I say, I don't know where I posted it, but in one of the posts of this photo, I had said, look at my eyes. And the first photo, I'm looking down. Like, I don't even have the confidence to look myself in the
Yeah.
face when I'm taking a photo.
Yeah.
You know, broken. Yeah. So it's interesting that you make that comment because everybody does.
Yeah.
There's a life that exists within me that didn't before. So you're asking what were some of the things I did to lose the weight practically?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what motivated you, or what things were motivating you to lose that weight, and what did you end up doing like to start that process?
Yeah. So I hired a trainer, number one.
Gotcha. Okay.
I understood my psychological relationship, my emotional relationship with food.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's the problem, you guys, is most trainers. So I didn't hire a fitness trainer. I hired someone who was a specialist in understanding your psychology around food.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different.
Yep.
Because I can give you all the training plans and all the macros and all the supplements all day. But if you don't change, if you don't do the deep work and understand the negative relationship you have with food, or maybe the overly positive relationship you have with food, then you're never going to make progress because food is always going to take priority over your fitness, right? Your feelings are going to take priority over your fitness. And so we don't eat for our fitness, we eat for our feelings, right? And so what I had to do was go through an audit of my emotional relationship with food. And what I realized was that when I was hungry, I ate. When I was sad, I ate. When I was angry, I ate. When I was stressed, I was ate. When I was at weddings, I overate. When I was at funerals, I overate.
Yep.
Every single event of my life, I went to food for comfort. It was powerful. And I actually do the same thing with my clients now. I take those same concepts that I learned, and we go through an audit of our relationship with food. And so, for example, one of the things that we use is I teach guys about the three types of hunger. There's stomach hunger, which is real, genuine hunger, like your body needs it. There's mouth hunger, and that's when you're like craving something salty or sweet or, a certain crunchy thing, mouth hunger. And then there's heart hunger, which is when when you're eating because you're pissed off or you're stressed or you're happy or you're mad. You're eating because you're emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go through this process and be like, I want you to document every time you eat. Which one of these was this: stomach hunger, heart hunger, or mouth hunger? And 99% of the time, it's usually heart hunger, and sometimes it's mouth hunger. Rarely it is actually stomach hunger. So I do a thing with the guys, with my clients. I'll say, I have the apple test. So if you look in the fridge and you see an apple and that's ripe and that's ready to eat, and you're like, I don't really want the apple. Well, you're not actually hungry, because if you were hungry, you would eat the apple, and the apple would be tempting to you. So if you're looking at the fridge and you don't want the apple, but you do want the potato chips, well, maybe you're not eating because your stomach hungry. Maybe you're eating because your mouth hungry. You understand what I mean? So
Yeah.
anyways, understanding that, and our environments that we're raised in, our behaviors, our cultures,
Yeah.
right? And something simple like this, and these things usually are formed when we're children. So when I would come home from school, I was bullied in school, as a kid. I'd come home from school and my mom would say like, "So I'm sorry you had a bad day. Here's a cookie." Right? That'll make you feel better.
Mhm.
And so I began to form a psychological relationship or an emotional connection with when I'm sad, cookies make me happy, right? When I'm sad, brownies make me happy. Brownies fix, I know it sounds silly, but brownies
true.
fix my problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I did was as I became a grown ass man, I'm coming home and I'm stressed out, so I'm slamming a bowl of, 4 or 5 scoops of ice cream
Yeah.
because I deserve it,
Yeah.
you know? And so we have to be careful as parents that we don't use food to comfort our children because they will use food to correct their feelings, right? And so that's what started. That was a bond that formed with me in the beginning of my life, and I dealt with it for 35 years, and that's why I couldn't lose the weight. So to get back to your question, the biggest thing I did was come to understand my emotional relationship with food and understand how my environments, my culture, my upbringing played into that because food and our diet results to 85% of our fitness results. Okay. Only what you do in the gym only contributes to 15% of your fitness results. You cannot out train a bad diet.
Yep.
So I tell my
My
clients,
doctor said that to me last week. No, literally, he did. He was just like, because this was my first time with him, and he was like, "Hey, you're overweight," and I told him, and like, yeah, I need to get back to exercising, and he was like, "It's not the exercise,
It's what you're putting in.
it's your diet.
Yeah.
The exercise is not going to get you. If you're putting in more carbs and more calories than what you're burning, you're never, and you don't burn that many calories when you're working out, at least as much as you think you do." He was like, it's never gonna make progress. So sorry for interrupting you
no,
on that,
it's
but it just like was like, wow, okay, this is the
Yeah. Yeah.
second person that said that to me.
well, here's the thing, man. I tell my clients, I'm like, hey, if you got a limited amount of time and you're going to skip one thing, and it's between meal prepping and the gym, skip the workout. Because you think about it, bro, in business, if we had said, oh, our profit, 85% of our profit comes from this client and 15% of our profits come from this client, who are we going to focus on? The 85%.
85.
It would be
should.
ridiculous to
Yeah.
ignore the 85% and just focus. I'm going to meet with this client that gives me 15% profits 5 days a week. I'm going to go, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Don't go to the gym to lose weight. Go to the gym to get strong. That's what we go to the gym for, to get strong. Don't go to the gym to punish yourself because of what you ate. Because you're not going to repair that. Your body is built in the kitchen and sculpted in the gym. So focus on the diet. Another thing I do with my clients is like even I'll build their nutrition plans based off of the food that they're already eating, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to get you to try and get over this psychological, crazy emotional hurdle right now. I'm not going to give you some cookie cutter nutrition plan because, or like you can't like make you start learning how to cook all these new foods and all that stuff because you're not there yet. Tell me
Yeah.
what you're already eating. Tell me the 4 to 5 staple meals in your home. I want to build your nutrition plan based off of that because that's your best chance of success. We're not going to do anything that's not sustainable, right? Because if you can't do this for the rest of your life, why are we doing it at all? Because we're not doing this for a fad. We're doing this to change your life.
Yeah.
And so that's why all my plans are custom and tailored to each client because at the end of the day, that's what's going to be sustainable. Or like if you say, even the gym, like a commercial gym, is super intimidating for some people. So I'm like, you don't have access to a gym? That's fine. You got a yoga mat and a dumbbell? I'll make a plan for you. Like
Yeah.
whatever is easiest for you because we're trying to eliminate as many barriers as possible. So yeah, man, that's a little bit about how I approach, weight loss and fitness and kind of what I put my weight into.
Justin, I will say, I don't know if I've told this before. One place I realized I need to be more honest with myself about is whenever I go grocery shopping. If I bring it home, it means I'm saying okay to eat it. So if I put the tub of ice cream in the cart, I have to acknowledge to myself, hey man, you're going to eat this later. Do you want, stop for a second? Now you have the moment of power to not be eating ice cream at 11 p.m. This is whenever
Yeah.
you stop that. Not like if the ice cream's in the freezer, it's getting eaten. So like, that's a thing I had to be more blunt with myself about. Like, if you buy a box of cookies, you're going to eat these cookies. It's the lifestyle you want, one who eats cookies all the time. No, don't buy the cookies. Just don't buy the
Yeah.
cookies. You'll be fine.
Yeah. So my wife loves baking, and we get a rule.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, if you're gonna make a dozen cookies, you're gonna give 10 of them to our neighbors, and we're gonna have 2 left over. I'm gonna eat 1, and
Yeah.
well, I don't tell her how much she can eat, but I'm like, I'm gonna eat
Yeah,
2.
yeah.
Right, one today, maybe 1 tomorrow. But if you leave all 12 here within
eating
a
all
week,
12.
oh, I'm eating all 12.
I'm eating all 12. Yep.
I mean, it's based off of this principle of like James Clear talks about this in his book Atomic Habits, and it's all about environment design. And he's like, you have to optimize your environment for success in whatever goals you have. And so make the habit difficult, right, to do. So if it's M&Ms, then just don't bring them home. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. And you guys, I have had to full on take a different route home from work that was 5 minutes longer because I could not resist the McDonald's drive-through. So I'm like,
Yeah.
well, this route, I don't see any fast food joints. And so if I'm going to get serious about this, I'm not even taking the fastest route home, because if I don't even
Smart.
have the willpower to say no to the Golden Arches, then I'm going to take a different route.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very intense level of like bluntness you have to do with yourself though, because it is those little, I don't know what you want to call them, landmines or whatever. But yeah, if you drive by the McDonald's and you know how easy it is to drive through the McDonald's, you gotta change it up. You gotta change your habits, because your brain is in a place in which it will go and pull into the drive-through because it says this is easy. There's comfort here. I will enjoy this. And you're like, but an hour later you won't. And the moment you do, an hour later you'll hate yourself. So let's try to figure out how to like yourself every day a little bit more.
Well, and this is what we do, right? We lie to ourselves constantly. Men, especially, are really good at this, and we tell ourselves false truths, and we kind of pride ourselves on them. But if we're really honest with ourselves, we're not in control. That is the power of having accountability in your life, is because someone's, for example, if your kids are constantly pushing you over the edge and you're snapping at them, or you're snapping at your wife, you're not in control.
Yeah.
You are giving them your power. They have power over you. If you can't say no to McDonald's or anything else we talked about, you are not in control. So that's okay. But like, the first step to getting control is to understand that you're lying to yourself. And in order to get to where you want to go, you have to be honest. And honesty is uncomfortable because it means that we have to admit that we're weak. And we don't like admitting that we're weak as men. But the irony of it is, the true strength comes from being comfortable with admitting where your weakness is, because that's how you get to where you want to go. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Dude, thank you so much, man.
So Mitchell, how we end every episode is we ask our guest our series of 5 questions. You have time to think about it and everything, but when Justin's ready, I'll ask the first question.
Yeah. Mitchell, did you have any backup names?
no.
No?
Me and my wife,
You knew right off the bat?
we went through like 300 names, and it was literally the only name that we both agreed on.
Nice. All right.
That's awesome.
I was like, all my eggs are in this basket.
Yeah. Like, it's this, or I don't know what to do. That's awesome. Do you have a favorite TV or movie dad?
Tim Allen, Home Improvement.
Yeah.
Percent.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Solid.
Yeah. Next question. Do you have a go-to replacement curse word?
Mm,
Or do you just curse in
I
front of
just
your
prefer the
family?
original.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a much more common answer than you would think. Some people, they get real elaborate. They say, dadgummit. They say all this stuff. Other people are like, am I not supposed to say the word? Because I thought I was supposed to say the word.
I just tell my son or daughter sorry afterwards.
I guess like maybe dang.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Anyways,
It just
Gotcha.
doesn't feel the same though. Next question. What's a favorite kid's toy or activity that you like to do with your son?
He's got these magnetic blocks.
Yeah, those are fun.
And yeah, so I mean, he's just learning how to build things right now. Legos are a little advanced for him.
Yes.
But I actually love playing with them more than he does, because I stack them and I want to expand on it and get more.
Yeah.
And he just, yeah, I don't know why. And it's the way the sound they make when they click
That's
together.
fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Man, so good.
Have you gotten to the point where you'll build an elaborate city and then your son comes and gets this look in his eyes as he knows he's about to destroy everything you just destroyed, or he's about to destroy everything you just worked on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, last question. Best parenting advice you have received.
So when we found out we were going to have a baby, friends of mine said to us, do not wait. Like when they're crying late at night or anytime really, especially, those first few weeks postpartum, do not wait till you're at 100%, like where you're at 100%, expended capacity. Send off your child at 80%. Because if you're exhausted and you go to 100%, you're going to do something dumb.
Mhm.
Or if you're so stressed out and you're pushed past your limit, you're going to shake them, you're going to do something, you're going to, and so don't ever wait till you get to 100%. Once you hit 80%, let your wife know, hey, I'm at 80, can you come in? And then she can, and once you guys hit 80, that's just like your ground rule. It's like you're tagging in. That last 20% is a dangerous zone. Hand them off or step out or whatever at 80%. It's probably the
Yeah.
best advice I've been given.
That's
Great
solid.
advice.
And I
Yeah.
have too many times I've gotten to 100 or 110% and realized the moment to turn the car around was about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. Or you say something dumb, when they're older,
Yeah.
you say something dumb or you do, whatever the case is, right? So,
Yeah. And then last thing for you is just a moment for self-promotion. If we want to find, like, what's your website, Instagram handle? If we want to follow you, how do we find you? All that good stuff.
yeah, man, I'm on, like, Instagram's my big
Yeah.
thing. So at Dad Nation Co. You can check out my website at Dad Nation Co. It's all that. YouTube at Dad Nation Co. Podcast is Dad Nation Podcast.
Cool.
But if you listen to this and you're, I would say the biggest thing is if you want help with the things we've talked about, the best thing you can do is just connection call with me, free discovery call. We can walk through sort of where you're at, and talk about how I can help. And if you are listening to this podcast, then in the notes in your application form, just say you heard about me on the Imperfect Dads podcast, and then I'll make sure that I'm the one who jumps on the call with you so that you get
Cool.
to talk to me directly, not like
That's
one
awesome.
of my salespeople kind of thing. And so we can make it just a genuine connection and get you the help you need.
Sweet. Awesome. Mitchell, as we've discussed a lot during this episode, we are trying to hopefully create a space for men in which they can acknowledge the things that they need help in and then find resources to get that help. So thank you for sharing your story.
Yes,
thank you for sharing with us all the things that you've learned as you've gone on this journey. Because, we know that there are lots of men who know there's a better version of themselves, but they don't always know the first step to take to get there.
Mhm.
And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're putting your energy into. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for reaching out, having me on the show. I appreciate it. It's been a powerful conversation, and I hope I've served your audience well. So thanks for having me.
You definitely
Absolutely.
have. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mitchell. Have
man.
a good day.
You
Bye.
too.
Thank you for listening to the episode.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram at The Imperfect Dads Podcast.
And make sure to subscribe and rate us 5 stars wherever you listen to us.
The music is provided by the Wildfeathers.
And all episodes are produced and edited by me.
Make sure to tune in Mondays for new episodes.